Hello folks, I know it's been a while, probably happy about that, but I want to talk to you this early January 2020 about taking cuttings. I know a lot of people don't have the ability to just put cuttings any place and to make a whole lot of trees, so I guess part of the idea here is to make the trees and the resources you have go as far as you can. This right here is a cutting of a Trident maple, and that is a little bit over an inch in diameter. I just potted it up in December, and now it's the 18th of January 2020. So that was December 2019 I potted this up, and it's doing okay, but that was a cutting that I took last year, and kind of about this time, whether it was in December or early January, it doesn't matter to me, and I don't keep records like that. But the idea there is that you can take plenty of cuttings, and right here I've got plenty of cuttings that I've taken off of a tree that I'm growing in the ground and that I'll be working on. And in a little while I'll show you how to deal with these cuttings. This one is probably ½ inch, or just a little bit larger than a ½ inch. And so right now we're going to kind of do a little bit of a garden walk. Plus I'm going to show you, because the focus here is taking cuttings, I'm going to show you what you can do with a cutting. And I'll give you my take on how I deal with cuttings, and you can go from there. Okay, so we'll come back here in a little while, but for right now we're going to take a little walk. Okay, so we'll start right here where the back of the camera is actually, and these are cuttings. Okay, those are Trident maples, and there's more right there. Okay, same time as the cuttings that I've shown you in the pot. These right here are Trident maple cuttings that I recently potted up. These are cuttings that I took out of the ground, and I'll show you what I'll do with that in a little bit. These are cuttings. That's about 30 some cuttings right here, and these are more Trident maple cuttings right here. Okay, so we'll walk around here. These are cuttings of mulberry trees. I just potted those up last week, and as you can see, the pots right here, these are cuttings that I just stuck over the past few days, and they come from these Trident maples right here. That's close to 100 trees in here that I will be air layering some of these this year, and I'll be taking some out for pot growth and development. You know how bad I am about photographing this stuff. So you can see that Trident over there. That's one that I'm considering taking up this year. That's about a 3 or 4 inch trunk right there that I'm considering removing for further development. And that Trident is one that I've been working on for a couple of years right here by itself, and I'll probably take it up also. These are dwarf white mulberry cuttings, and I just stuck those probably 3 weeks ago now. Okay, so that's some of what you can do with cuttings. And I've got more cuttings back here that I've taken, Trident maples, and that comes from this growing area. This was my original growing area, and when I started off again with about 100 trees in here, and I've thinned them out, used them for various things over the past several years. So cuttings, depending on how much area you've got to work with and what you have available to you for source material, it's fine. Okay, right here I've got that's a elm root that I've turned up, and it's already, after about 2 weeks now, maybe 3 weeks, it's already putting on sprouts. That does not guarantee that it will actually take. I mean, once it's turned up, and we've been somewhat warm this year, it's going to produce sprouts in it regardless of the weather or anything else. But if those sprouts continue to grow into February, then I know that everything is good, and then that root will have taken. These are elm cuttings that I've taken off of trees that I had growing here that I dug and reset. This was a rooted cutting that I placed here last year, and it's developing a pretty nice trunk. So doesn't take much space. These are elm root cuttings. These I actually took and then put right underneath a bench, somewhat like you see right here. And so as I watered the plants on the bench, they got watered, and I pretty much just left them to their own devices. And you can see pots of Japanese maples, cuttings. This I labeled because they're special, but as you see here, there's no label here. I left the pot right next to this rough bark maple. That has a tag on it, and so when it comes to me leaving a plant or a pot of cuttings, if they're right near the plant that I took them from, I don't bother about labels. Time consuming. No label there, so I know what that is. It's from this tree right here, which is a tree that I found in a big box store, and I love the leaves on it so much I have to keep that around. Okay, so bunch of cuttings from the Sirisha. I have a whole bunch of varieties there, including pink. So more Trident maple cuttings right here that I potted this year. As a matter of fact, this is the best I've ever done. I have 9 Naruto cuttings. I took 9 cuttings. 9 cuttings struck. That means they rooted, and I left them right underneath the original plant, which I have out front. But these are your standard Trident maples. Other than these 9 Naruto, they're the incurved Trident maple. These are small leaf Trident maple, rooted cuttings. They're notoriously difficult, so are the Naruto, to strike. These were root over rock. Some were cuttings like this, root over rock. That was a cutting. Okay, so sometimes if a cutting is very large, or even an air layer, it may be difficult to use it on a root over rock or some situation like that. This was a cutting, okay, and I have it on the rock. It's low on the rock, but there's a shelf here at the base of the rock, and you really can't see it probably, but there's a bulge here, there's a shelf, and then I got the base of that cutting wedged into a cleft above that shelf on this particular rock. Now this has been growing about 3 seasons now, and at any moment I'll uncover it, rework it, and see how things go. More cuttings. These are my mind escapes me right now. Forsythia, and I have these planted on rocks to grow on. As a matter of fact, let me show you some more across the way here. I'll try to be as steady and as pleasant as I can. So if you can see as we approach the background here, these are forsythias, and all of these are rooted cuttings. Okay? These are rooted cuttings. I have that planted on the rock, and I covered it with sphagnum moss to protect the root until they harden off. But the sphagnum will come off and the roots are definitely exposed. This is just in a pot, and it's chock-a-block full of roots. I'm thinking about taking this out and planting it back in the ground. And exposed root, I just planted it in this pot from its growing pot, and so I'm supporting it. If you can see the green in the back, that's a piece of a bamboo shoot, and I've got it wired, and this is wired in position. But that's Sirisha from a cutting, and you can see the rock right there, root over rock, Sirisha, or forsythia, and another. And these are just from cuttings. It takes time, it takes some effort, but it'll pay off. And that's a long time fig that I've had from a cutting, and it was originally large like that. That is a Zelkova, and it's a Tanuki Phoenix graft, if you will. The wood is crepe myrtle, and there you have it. That was from a cutting, and this is a Zelkova also. It's from a cutting, and all from the original tree, which is the tall tree that's dormant in the background. This is the green right here is loquat. There's a crepe myrtle right there, and then in the background, Zelkova. I bought that, had it imported a long time ago, and put it in the ground to let it grow, and lo and behold, didn't get back to it in time. At any rate, that is actually a air layer, that big bougainvillea, but these are cuttings from it. And so that's an air layer, but these are cuttings. And I have, speaking of cuttings, see that crepe myrtle right there? That is a cutting. I just dug it after growing the roots for a couple of years, but that is a cutting. Yes, a cutting. I took that, took off the piece that I wanted, and I planted it with my technique, and boom, that's what we have. So we're going to go around to the front here, and hopefully you'll see some things in here that will pique your interest as we're walking. Right there, cuttings of the chase plant. More cuttings of mulberries. Japanese maples, pyracantha or firethorn, which firethorn right here from cuttings, and I think I have about 8 or 9 of these in here growing at various sizes, but doesn't take much, and the technique is good. We'll talk about this medium later on. And as you can see, I'm cleaning up, getting the weeds out. That's the chase plant. I actually grew that from a seed and that I got out of a landscape somewhere, and I just dug it up from right here to give more room in this area to free up my maples. I guess since we're here, we'll look into this area. I've got an assortment of plants in here, but we're considering the Trident maples. You can see that trunk there. There's another couple of trunks, and I'll air layer these, but this right here is the small leaf Trident, and I actually graft some of the top areas out as well as air layer some of the top. And I've got containers right here with cuttings in it. We'll go around this way. So, small leaf Trident, Naruto Trident, and this is your common Trident maple. And I label these because, of course, they're so close to these other containers that I have here with the common Trident maples. I don't want them confused, but generally speaking, if I leave a pot out somewhere, it's right next to the tree, and usually they're not mixed so much. My situation is good but bad. I had a big old pine tree here. It had damaged branches on it, and before I could get a tree service out, actually I was going to wait until everything went dormant, and I was going to lay it down myself, but the boars destroyed the tree, and before the tree was fully dead, I hired someone to come cut the pine tree out. Well, I had more of these small leaf Trident maples. Like I said, notoriously hard to propagate, and the row was right across here, and they seemed to hit every one but 3 trees. This one they even damaged out of the 3 that I have remaining. So I have to start over. I think I had 9 trees here. And you might be able to see that. Small leaf. This isn't because this is the beginning of the year. That's because that's how small that is. And so now I'm going to go over here and show you the Trident maple, and then we'll come back out and go talk about the rooted cuttings. Okay, that's the Trident maple. I just cut that back. Some of this upper stuff I'm going to air layer out because of the size of them. I can use some of those apex pieces and then grow this on, but I guess that's about 3 feet tall, and the main trunk, that is. And at this point the upper branches are about 10 feet tall, but that's what I'm working on right now, and I took the cuttings off of that. And again, this is how these are winged elms, and I just leave the pots right here next to the tree. See, I put these rooted cuttings in the ground about late 2018. I've got 2 of them here, and I've taken these cuttings off, and I just leave the pots here. And some I actually put in the ground, and they take. I've got some over here that's already rooted. So, and that's the Naruto that I've taken the cuttings off of and had those to strike. And again, I'm subject to leave the cuttings right on the ground where the donor plant is, and everything is okay. So, speaking of cuttings, you can see the crepe myrtles in the ground right here, and I've got them all along here, which I've taken a few select trees out and either potted them up in a bonsai pot, or I've put them into a growing pot if I have other intents. So, more about cuttings. Now, you can see in that Trident maple tree, the bags and such, those are for air layers. And so is that Japanese green maple for air layers. That actually has roots in it. I took those off and reset the pot and the air layer. So come March or so, I'll take that tree down. For all intents and purposes, this was a rooted cutting. That is a bottle brush plant. See, it doesn't take much, but I've wired it and it's growing pretty nicely. That was a tree that I bought, but rooted cuttings, easy. You can see that's a Chinese elm grove, rooted cuttings. That tree right there, Trident maple on the rock, was a rooted cutting. It used to be a single plant in a container. I took it to the bonsai club to show it. It was beautiful, nice shape and whatnot. And that edge over there died after I got back for some reason. So I decided to put it on that rock later on, and I'm happy about that. As a matter of fact, that rock is actually contrived. I've got 4 rocks there, and I glue them together with hydraulic cement. So the base that it's all sitting on, and then you can see the first layer, the second layer, and then that third piece is glued together. And it's been there for a while, and it's pretty stable. So I'm happy about the results so far, and it's thriving. Rooted cuttings. That is a bougainvillea. That big bougainvillea that I showed you in the back that I said was an air layer and had cuttings. Well, this is part of it. And I've been growing it in a container like this. And actually it was upright. And one windy, rainy period, it fell over and it ended up in the pot that way, and that's the way I left it. So, here we go. Rooted cuttings. You can see the jade plant here. I've wired it. I know it's going to be kind of difficult to see, but all from rooted cuttings. That right there also wired just from a cutting. Pretty sizable. That tree is not from a cutting from me, but no doubt at some point it was a rooted cutting, and I've been using it for stock basically. And eventually this is going to get some kind of cohesive training, but it's just a rooted cutting, and so is that right there. And my Procumbian nana on a rock, it was just a rooted cutting. That juniper right there, I grew that juniper over time. No doubt, you can do a lot with the rooted cuttings. The fig right there, it was a large cutting. As a matter of fact, I cut the top out because it was another 1.5 feet or so. But it doesn't take much, just a little bit of know-how. So we're going to go in the back, and I'm going to show you how I deal with the rooted cuttings. And these are my elm cuttings in these pots that I just take in mass, and I'm going to plant them right here underfoot. And again, as you see, I've been cleaning this area out and putting down this fabric. I usually grow in open beds, you know, no landscape fabric, but the weeds are getting me. I'm getting old. I'm getting too old for having to weed and such. So I'll be putting down more landscape fabric and a few bottle brush cuttings that I just repotted these up. Cuttings of the sweet plum, Sirisha thesan, Chinese plum. And again, cuttings. Okay, so you need to prepare your area that you're going to put your cuttings in. And I've already cleared this out. I've got the weeds out. This area is my septic tank area. As a matter of fact, where these angel trumpets are located, I just put those there just to overwinter, since it's cloistered in near the house. And I didn't feel like planting them in pots and putting them in the greenhouse, so I just put them there, and they're fine. The cuttings that I showed you in these pots earlier, these cuttings here, a lot of them came from in the ground right here. Okay, so you want to have a good sunny location, good moisture and drainage, good access to it, and you have to be able to get the weeds out if you're going to do this in the ground. Okay, so I get lots of rain off of the house. It's open enough, but it's kind of blocked from the elements. All right, and again, you see the Trident maples out there and the pots that I have the cuttings in. I don't have any super large cuttings. In other words, anything over, well, from an inch or over. And I do take cuttings that are larger than an inch from time to time. So what I'm going to show you here, it's up to you how you'd like to deal with that. Okay, but let's say you have a large cutting, an inch, 2 inches. You can cut that on an angle like that, okay? So this is the part that goes in the ground, but it's cut on an angle. Now the problem with this is, more than likely, if you get roots, it's going to root on this longest end, because all your hormones are draining down and moving toward that particular point. But I've had pretty good success with that. As a matter of fact, this is that way also, okay? This is cut on that angle, and it doesn't bother me because I understand it, and I'm growing this at an angle like that. I don't want the tree straight up anyway. So now the other way, just cut it straight across like normal, okay? So it's squared off on the bottom. Nice sharp cutters, and if there's anything growing, but regardless of whatever size cuttings that you take, what I've found is that you can take your cutting and damage the cambium around the base, okay? So wherever you are, if it's on the table, on a rock, on a crate next to you, can you see that? See the damage there around the cambium? Don't go wiping off anything. Don't go pushing and cleaning. Don't make mashed potato out of it. Don't beat it to a sugarcane pulp. You just want to damage the cambium at the base. Probably like, we'll call this 1/2 inch as far as the diameter of this goes, okay? Yep, right at a 1/2 inch, okay? So you want to go up from a 1/4 inch to about a 1/2 inch as far as the damage. And all the damage does not have to be uniform, you know. Just make sure you go all the way around that particular area and break that cambium, okay? When you have a 1/2 inch or larger cutting, you want to sink that into the ground at least half the distance of the cutting that you've taken, okay? A little bit more, a little bit less won't hurt you, but you know, you want to get into that half, the length of that underground, so that the moisture from this is retained a lot better. It also gives stability because you've got the wind coming, the birds and the animals coming through, okay? If you're going to put it in a pot, lean it to the side of the pot. You're going to lean it to the side of the pot, so the pot will help support this to keep the wind from blowing and birds flying through, landing on it. It's not going to knock it over and disturb the base of your plant, okay? So those are some of the tips. Now, as far as rooting hormone, if you want to use it, fine. It's time consuming and such a big headache. I've got a big container that I paid a lot of money for, and I did not use the rooting hormone on this or any of these other cuttings that I've taken. In fact, it was so hot this past summer, and I do this because I love it. It's not my income, it's not my livelihood. You know, it helps me live, yeah, because this is what I do and because I enjoy it, I love it. I had cuttings larger than this one that rooted, but because it was so hot, and I'm putting out this water sprinkler, sometimes, you know, I'm not able to go in and investigate every place that I have around here. They died, okay? The growth from the trees above and the weeds growing up prevented the water from getting in. And we didn't have much of a rain when we did get rain this past summer. So I've had rooted cuttings, you know, 1.25 inches, almost 2 inches, that actually rooted, but again, they croaked on me because I couldn't get back to them, you know. So again, if you want to, even small pieces like this, you can take them and just gently break the cambium, and you'll see the green come through, okay? And then you can stick them. Now that's about 1.5 foot, 2 feet, okay? This is smaller than that, and you don't have to worry about placing this as far into the soil, but you want to get it at least, you know, 1/3 of the distance in there, okay, into your soil, whether you use a pot or whether you place this in the ground, okay? So again, I've taken a lot of cuttings off of that one Trident maple, and I'm going to plant these in the ground over here in a little while, okay? Now, if you're going to use a pot, you want to have your pot filled up, you know, 3/4 of the way, and again, depending on the size of cuttings that you're taking, but 3/4 of the way or to the top. But just like when you do your bonsai, you want to leave a lip or a little recess from the top of the soil to the top of the container so that moisture will collect in there, not just simply run off, okay, and then it can drain through and have good drain holes. These holes are on the side, and then there's one in the bottom also. Now, this is what we call around here tan sand, okay? It's just a filler sand. When the contractors, are more than not, when they're building houses, they use this to build up the foundation, okay, to start their project. This has a small amount of clay in it, okay, red clay. It's very small, so it doesn't, you know, this is kind of moist today, but if it was bone dry, it would just turn to powder. Not quite as sugar sand or the white builder sand or beach sand, but this is very dry and it's loose and airy, okay? So this tan sand is what I like. I've used this for years and years, and it doesn't, for me at least, it does not mold or mildew like the white builder sand. I've used that and I really don't like it. And but this stuff I like a lot. So you have to look around your area, experiment or whatever. But you know what? The bottom line is, if you got several hundred trees and you have to cut them down and get rid of the stuff anyway, what are you out of? And that's part of why I say that the rooting hormone, you know, I don't have time for it. You know, I may go and cut the tops out of, you know, 20, 30 trees or whatever, and I've got all of those cuttings. Well, I'm going to stick them somewhere. A lot of times I'll stick cuttings right there in the pots, right along with what I'm working with, okay? So it's just my habit. So I'll stick cuttings in the ground right there where I'm standing, you know, not preparing the soil or anything. And I've got cuttings around here right now, even right here to my left in the ground, where I showed you the cuttings in these gallon pots that I just stuck in the ground, and they're rooted. Eventually I'll get in and dig them up and do something with them, but I'll always have a supply. Then there's always something unique about different cuttings, you know, so it will lend to my creativity by taking those particular cuttings and doing something with it. Whether they live or die after that, I don't really care. I just like growing stuff. That's my first love and enjoyment. How big of a air layer can I take? How big of a cutting can I take? Also, you know, what did I do to make it as successful as it was, or what did I do that it failed? Okay, location, the angle of the cut, damage to the cambium. I have a Trident maple in the front that I took out of my logo Trident maple some years ago now, and I guess it's been close to 15 years. But what I did was I bashed the fire out of the base of it, stuck it in a 5-gallon pot with sand, tan sand, and then I put that 5-gallon container inside of a 25 or 30-gallon growing pot, all with sand in each one, and then I tinted that. And I've still got the tree, and it means more to me because Not so much that it came out of the top of my logo tree, but that I got it to root, and it was well over 2 inches at the time, okay? And so now here it is, over 15 years, and I still got that. So if you can remember the root over rock Trident that I said was a single planting and part of it died when I took it to the club, that is a cutting off of my logo plant. So I've got, you know, I've got a lot more trees around here that actually comes from that original tree or from seedlings out of the big tree that I have the air layers in, and that tree was a cutting from the original or my logo tree. But you know, I actually have other trees around here that I've bought or brought in from other sources, so I don't have the same stock, and diversity is good. So it depends on what you like, what you prefer, what area you have to grow in. I don't have any real constraints on where I can grow. I don't do landscape. It looks pretty, it's wonderful, but I don't have to do landscape. All I need to do is have a few open areas and know that I'm not stepping on a snake, and I'm good, okay? But other than that, I'm just growing stuff, digging stuff up, potting stuff, and every once in a while I'll hit onto a bonsai or a pre-bonsai that I am impressed with because it was done by my hands. But you know, my main focus and love is rooting plants and trees, and I love my Trident maples, I love my Japanese maples, I love my elms, my junipers, primarily Procumbum nana, because they do so well in this area. Those are my focus, and if I don't have any other trees or plants around here, I'm good with those. So, at any rate, you can take large cuttings. You don't need rooting hormone. You just need a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of wisdom, and lots of patience. Take some cuttings. See you later.